Is my screen visible?
Yes, it is.
So, welcome everyone. With over 18 years of experience in machine learning and decision science, Dr. Parul Naib, who holds a PhD in public health, has been instrumental in developing advanced data analytics systems, monitoring risk management frameworks, and strategic plans to address diverse developmental challenges. Her expertise Her expertise includes providing technical support for the Government of India's Ayushman Bharat Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, the world's largest public funded healthcare scheme. She has also played a pivotal role in evidence based policy research, fraud control, and strategic partnerships with the public and private sectors. In addition to clearing the civil services exam in 2007, Dr. Naib holds a PhD in public health from IIHMR University, a master's in economics from the Delhi School of Economics, and a professional certification in risk management from Stanford University. She has co-authored over 10 working papers and policy briefs on the PMJAY scheme and has presented her research at numerous conferences, including an international delegation to South Korea, where she discussed the role of AI and ML in healthcare fraud control and medical audits. Before joining the World Bank, Dr. Naib served as Chief Minister's Good Governance Fellow in Chhattisgarh, where she provided policy and advisory implementation support to the State Health Secretary. She led data analysis, modeling, monitoring, and evaluation efforts for various healthcare e-governance initiatives. Dr. Naib also serves on the Ethics Committee of the Catalyst Foundation, reviewing research proposals from various organizations. She has previously tutored data analytics at ICISA and is currently a visiting faculty member at IIHMR University, Bangalore for digital health initiatives. She is also a part of workshops at the National Insurance Academy, Pune. It's my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Parul Naib, and without further ado, I hand over the session to you, ma'am.
Thanks so much, Neha. It's a pleasure being here, and thank you for the kind words and the introduction. So we can quickly jump into the session. I can share my screen. So first of all, like I just wanting to understand what's the kind of audience that we have today. Like how many are healthcare practitioners? Do we have like some kind of a voting system that we can understand from? Like what's the population? Is it mostly students here today? Neha, do we have any idea on like
Uh,
how does it?
Ma'am, we have a mixed bag of students, mixed bag of audience actually.
Okay.
We have students, we have professionals, and pharmacy students are there, and
Perfect.
other
I
other
see a
people are
stream
there.
of chat. Yeah, I see a stream of chat coming through, so I can see a lot of them are students. Okay, great.
Yes, ma'am. And I request the audience to please put in your questions for the Q&A session into the chat box, and whenever ma'am wants, ma'am can address it.
So let's keep the session interactive first of all. So if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me. I may not be able to see your hand raised, so just feel free to jump in and stop me, and we can address the questions as it goes. And then at the end, again, like if there are more questions, we can address them. So today we're going to cover like five basic key themes. One is around like AI/ML, what it implies, and then the use cases of AI/ML in healthcare, and then like how people are collaborating to use AI/ML, and then like how AI/ML itself can be made more responsible and ethical. So first of all, let's look at what is AI and machine learning. So really, when we look at AI, what is it? It's really a set of like computer systems that we are talking about, which has developed a human-like intelligence, and it is now capable of learning or reasoning or problem solving. So if you were to think of like what are the different types of AI, like initially you had basic level AI, which was just doing repetitive tasks, which you could assign like kind of like Siri or something, where you're just asking it to organize your calendar. over time it became more and more sophisticated, so it started learning more things. So it started doing like image classification. It was able to distinguish that this is a dog versus this is a cat. And then it became more intelligent, started talking to us. So you got chatbots, and now you have chat gpt, which is now able to reason through and even like make sense of the conversation you are making with it. And then like on the more extreme side, which is being anticipated, is how AI will become even more intelligent than human beings. So we will have situations where the AI is able to reason and solve much more complex problems than even the humans who are creating them. So kind of like supercomputers, or if you've seen the movie Terminator, then kind of like a Skynet, which is trying to obliterate the entire human race because it's become so much intelligent than us. And then machine learning is a concept which goes hand in hand with AI. So it is about how the AI itself is able to learn and adapt itself. So it's not a static system anymore. So whatever training you've given to the AI initially, it learns and adapts over time as more data is coming in and as more information is coming in, without even having to explicitly program it to do that. So, if we were to look at what are the key components of AI, like you'll keep hearing these terms and again in today's industry. So, machine learning, deep learning. Now, what are these things? So, machine learning, I just spoke about. Now, what is deep learning exactly? So, traditional machine learning systems were explicitly programmed to do a few things, like, for example, object detection or classification of a few things. Like, let's say you have a set of people who are having a certain disease, and you will pass that data, and the model will try to tell you who is probably having a higher likelihood of a person having that disease versus not. Now, what started happening with deep learning was that though the classification problem remained the same, but how the machine reached that particular output started coming in a black box. So the machine developed its own intelligence, and you just needed to feed it input and did not need to explicitly program it to tell it, okay, what to do. The machine would somehow figure out, okay, you are giving me this image, what does this imply? Similarly, like with natural language processing, like a lot of unstructured data which is out there, we take all that information. How do we process that information to make sense? So, for example, patient feedback that's coming to us on a regular basis. Now, how do we take all that level of written text, and how do we organize it into information which hospitals can use, which doctors can use to understand what are the core things that patients are talking about? Now increasingly we're also seeing systems which have generative AI. So they're able to not only just generate summaries of what you've said, but they're able to create content. So they're able to create images, they're able to create videos, and a lot of information which was lying, you had sparse data, for example, let's say for certain kind of medical information was sparse images, or your lab reports. Now using gen AI, you can create a lot of synthetic data as well. This synthetic data can then be used for further research, for further machine learning, for further training of models. So this is increasingly becoming very important. And like since a lot of you are students and researchers, you would be using, I'm guessing, a lot of generative AI even for, as you're writing up your papers, as you're looking for suggestions on what are the references you should be looking at. So AI is helping quite a bit in these areas as well. Then we come to computer vision. So computer vision is something like doing object detection, trying to classify your images better, and then expert systems, which are like your recommendation engines. So now increasingly, like you will see the use of a lot of expert systems also coming into play when it comes in the form of apps, or in the form of doctor related advisory guidance machines. So these are increasingly now coming into use. So, looking at some of the prominent use cases of AI in healthcare and how that came about. So, basically, if we were to take a look, EHRs are your primary building blocks. So, the most important information that is required for any kind of model building is your electronic health records. So, a move away from paper-based records towards electronic health records has now prompted the vast use of AI and machine learning systems. And these are not just systems where you just store the data, so they just have the information recorded, but a lot of processing is now increasingly happening so that more decisions, better recommendations can be generated in order to reduce prescription errors, in order to reduce medical errors. And we are not just now looking at just your structured data, but also unstructured data like medical images, discharge summary, clinical notes, and trying to get all of those together to generate insights. Any questions so far? Take a pause. Okay. So let's look at some of the deep dive use cases of how AI and machine learning can help. So, firstly, looking at the early diagnosis and disease detection. So, first of all, like traditionally, we've always relied on radiologists to, first take our X-rays, and then we go to doctors, and then they will take a look at the report, and then we will get to know what disease you have. But increasingly now, what machine learning algorithms are doing is that they're able to scan through millions of your X-rays or chest scans or your pathological reports, and looking at those scans itself, they have learned what is actually the aberrancy to be detected. So you can leverage increasingly AI and machine learning systems to help identify some of these aberrancies. And increasingly, some of the radiological device manufacturers are also integrating this within their devices. That when we are taking an X-ray, what is the additional information we can give using AI as to even prediction of what's going to happen in future. So you are taking a chest X-ray out right now, but it's even able to predict what will happen 3 months down the line. And that's very important when it comes to early detection and diagnosis of high end, like higher end diseases like cancers, cardiovascular disorders, those kind of things. So then the disease prediction part, so again, like it's definitely helping us with having that foresight of, if we were given a longitudinal view of the patient data, what is the patient history, what is the family history, what kind of symptoms is this patient displaying, all that combination is now being used to now do disease prediction, and not just the data which is concerning that particular disease. It is about everything right now. So you're using data from your wearable devices, your Fitbits, all the information coming in real time is being used around lifestyle and trying to leverage that information to do the prediction. There was a report, I don't know if you people heard about it, but there were some studies which were looking at iris scans, for example. And looking at the iris scans, now they are able to predict who are the patients who are likely to develop a risk of stroke 5 years later just from the iris scans. So again, these kind of correlations were not possible by human beings earlier, because typically we'll just look at that particular disease and we'll be focused on data concerning that. But using AI, they were trying to look at different types of images and how that could correlate, and they found this correlation. So that is now increasingly now giving rise to this whole concept of clinical decision support systems. So what are really clinical decision support systems? They act as a support to the practitioner, to the doctor, in actually helping them in deciding what is the next best step for a patient. So typically your doctors have looked at the patient history, they've looked at clinical notes, they've looked at the medication this person has been taking, and based out of their own experience, they are giving, they're prescribing what's the next best step. But there is so much research which is coming out nowadays about the latest things which are coming out, which is talking about, okay, a new medication has come in the market, or a new type of treatment is now being prescribed for the same condition. So these clinical decision support systems are fed with all this latest data, and they increasingly start prompting the clinicians that you're talking about this medication, but maybe in this case you can consider these other things also which have now come out in the market. So increasingly these act as support systems. Again, I refrain from saying they're going to replace the doctor at any point of time, because there's a whole huge debate around this, and why doctors themselves do not want to adopt some of these things, thinking that this is something which might replace me. But the whole purpose of this is to make the life of the doctor easier. And how do you ensure that they get more, they're able to cater to what they really need to do, which is giving care, rather than just having to go through so many case summaries and going through so much patient history. Again, I'll take a pause and see if there are any questions so far. Okay. Is it helpful, guys? Are you finding this? I want this to be more of an interactive session, so it will be helpful if you guys share some, if you guys are finding it too fast, or if it's understandable.
Ma'am, there are few questions in the chat box.
Okay. So maybe Neha, can you read them out? Because like for me, because I'm sharing my screen, it's not easy for me to read it out. Did we lose
Yes,
Neha?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. No, no, no. I'm here, ma'am. I'll read them, ma'am. Uh, MBA. Ma'am, somebody is asking, can AI be used for diagnosis other than radiological diagnosis?
Yes, of course. So, like, even with your pathological reports, for example, it's being increasingly used for that as well. So, like, there is an additional step wherein like you need to do maybe OCR also, and also as I said, like looking at the clinical summaries of people. If you look at the patient history, we extract a lot of data using AI. So it's all we take all the images and then we can convert it into text, and then we leverage that information for better prediction purposes. So a lot of the generation of the unstructured data to a structured data format is also being done through AI right now, not just with radiological but other types of images, other type of notes, documents are also being used there.
Ma'am, the next question is, what is the full form of CPOE?
Okay, I think I'll have to get back on that. I think it's around like patient outcomes, but I am not remembering the full form right now. I will get back on this. It's a good point.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, somebody has Hari Om Singh is asking how AI are useful in pharmacy field.
How AI is in pharmacy? Is that it?
Yes, ma'am. How is
Okay,
AI
so
useful in pharmacy?
we will come to that. Like there are a few slides on that as well. So like you will see like from the drug development perspective also like how we are using AI. And I can also talk a little bit about like how pharma companies are using AI because I've worked in a pharma consulting company. So I can talk from my experience as well. So just give it a little bit of time and I'm sure we'll come to that. Okay, so one of the cases is here. So first of all, like looking at precision medicine. So traditionally, like as we saw that doctors were continuously prescribing just one type of medication for anybody having that particular disease, but increasingly this concept of precision medicine is now coming into play. So what precision medicine does is it looks at the entire patient pathway and the entire patient history. It looks at what kind of treatment has been given to the patient over time also, and how the patient himself has responded to those treatments. It looks at the genealogical makeup of the person as well, and then based on all these different information and based on the lifestyle that he's living, the kind of behavioral aspects as well, a personalized treatment plan is then developed for the patient. So it tells about what type of treatment will be most suitable for this person. So let's say a person who is 50 years old, has diabetes, and probably is not very active, and let's say there's a 20-year-old who doesn't have any comorbidities, is fairly active. It tries to distinguish between those two people and it prescribes different treatment plans based on all the information that is available for these two different population segments. So the other aspect that we are looking at is looking at predicting the patient health outcomes themselves. So from a hospital perspective, there are two or three important parameters that a hospital is concerned about, and also an insurance company. One is like whether a person is going to be readmitted. So looking at machine learning algorithms, we can predict who is likely to be readmitted based on the length of stay they had, the kind of conditions that they had even prior to being admitted, and then at the time of discharge, what's the kind of advice that is being given for them. So readmission risk is an important one even for insurance companies, because if a patient is getting readmitted again and again, first of all, they will not pay the hospital again and again, and secondly, it also means that the hospital is not giving proper care to the patient in the first place. The other thing is around mortality risk, which is survival analysis. So predicting how long a person will survive from this point onwards if a particular treatment plan is being given. And this is being used increasingly to decide which treatment to be given, especially for cancer patients, because as they are progressing through various stages, so they say there's a stage 1 cancer and then they progress to stage 2. At that time, it's important to see how they have responded to treatment in the past, and that is being then, the machine learns using that, and then it tries to forecast, okay, what is the survival probability after this treatment has been given. So mortality risk prediction is another important area. Then medication non-adherence. So who are the people who are likely not to consume the medicines as you're prescribing them? So identify these people, reach out to them, send them reminders that they need to take their medication in time, because that's going to be critical for them not to be readmitted in the hospital again. Then doing personalized patient analytics. So who are the patients we need to target? So again, this is important not only just from a hospital perspective, but even from a pharma perspective. If we were to see from a pharma perspective, they also have to like target customers. They have to target who are the doctors we should be reaching out to for selling our med, like, who would be our best representative in terms of pushing through this new medication which is coming to market. Now, again, here a lot of marketing analytics goes even from a pharma company perspective, because they've invested huge amounts in doing research. So they do a lot of risk profiling to first of all identify for which particular patient population is my medication most suitable. And then they will try to see, okay, doctors get those type of patients, and then they will try to target those doctors. And then the third one is finding the best treatment plans, which is like looking at how this patient should be treated along the way using all this precision medicine that we spoke about, and also optimizing the overall cost of care. So another area, like because you were talking about pharma, this is like on the drug and vaccine discovery side. This is an important area. So traditionally, like when people were doing a lot of research around medication, it was all about experimentation in the labs. But what is now increasingly happening is that using AI, people are able to simulate the molecular structures, and then they're able to try to create different types of drug combinations using AI. And the advantage with AI is that it can go through a lot of research which is being published, and going through the research, it can kind of like pick up which are the potential molecules to be used, try to create those combinations which can be repurposable for different treatments. So this amount of research which the AI can scan through and then synthesize that information, this is something which is definitely very helpful for pharma companies also, because they spend a lot of money in research. So with AI, they can get to at least some point. The other area is when pharma, for example, companies have to launch a drug in the market. They have to pass through a number of trials, phase 1, phase 2 trials, right? So at each given point of time, when they are passing through the trials, they have to show that their medication is not having as much adverse effects, or it's actually proving beneficial for the population. So the research study group that they have to choose when they are doing these drug trials becomes very important. So AI can even help in identifying which is the most suitable research study group when they're trying to do their drug and vaccine, not only discovery, but also as they're going into their clinical trials phase. Then about genomics, we spoke briefly. So of course, like genomics is now becoming more and more important. So people are increasingly realizing that even with the same level of care, people respond differently given the differences in their genes and how their DNA is sequenced. So with AI, a lot of research is now going into genomics, especially for things like cancer or things which can be passed on generation to generation, like diabetes, to understand how those kind of faulty genes itself can we kind of replace them, can we make them into something which is more stronger and more immune to certain kinds of diseases. So a lot of that thing is now happening using AI. And you will increasingly hear this concept of digital twin, and especially digital healthcare twin. So leveraging AI, a digital health twin is actually created. So for the same person, you try to see how different kind of medications will act on that same person, but not really on a person, but using AI, you're creating a synthetic twin, so to say, which can be used for testing purposes. So all these things are now becoming possible thanks to AI at this moment. Another area is the population health management area. So with COVID, for example, we saw that there was large scale epidemic. So with AI, a lot of this is now being there's a lot of real time population health monitoring which is going on. So even during COVID, like a lot of contact tracing which was happening, or surveillance monitoring which was happening, a lot of AI was being used for that, because a lot of data was getting generated, and at the same time it was being used for prediction on how the disease would spread, where the outbreak would be. So increasingly, with a lot of these outbreaks which we keep hearing about, monkeypox or some of these things, AI will play a bigger and bigger role in identifying about the spread and looking at how we can curb these epidemics, so to say. Another area where AI and machine learning is helping is on higher patient engagement. And again, this is like looking at how the patient experience has been, looking at how much active this patient is, looking at data from their wearable devices, and trying to come up with better patient engagement models. So, what channels does he respond to? What's a better way of reaching out to them? Then ensuring that their care, like if they move from a primary health facility to a secondary healthcare facility, how do you facilitate better care coordination across different doctors, so that everybody is getting all this information and they don't need to carry like files and files of information with them. It also helps. So now you'll see a lot of these patient empowerment apps, where people can keep track of everything themselves. How many steps have I taken, what's my heartbeat looking like today, what are my blood sugar levels. So increasingly patients themselves are taking more and more control, and they're able to track some of these metrics better. Further, chatbots, so a lot of hospitals are now launching chatbots or remote patient monitoring devices, through which people can get care even when they get to their home. So a lot of these engagement tools are now being facilitated by AI, and like using GPT related chatbots to have better conversations. And then looking at different contact channels to drive engagement with patients, like apps or having your own web pages, having phone calls. So all those things are now being facilitated by AI. And of course, like robotic surgery, so this I think has been around for quite some time, but recently the use of robotic surgery, particularly in specialized treatments, is increasingly being advocated. And even now insurance companies have started accepting that people will take robotic surgery, so they are covering for robotic surgery also. So the precision with which a robot can actually can do an operation in some cases is now being considered even better than that of how a surgeon is, because there's less chances of your tremor in the hand, and less fatigue which causes to the surgeon. So this is another important area where robotics through AI is now facilitating these kind of surgeries. So okay, so before we get to the next section, maybe like let's do another round of Q&A and see if there are any more questions.
Yes, ma'am, there are a couple of questions. So,
Okay.
there's a question from Ruchika Kolte. Which are the best universities that offer courses in healthcare AI and data analysis?
So I would say for this, I would say that probably you guys are the best people to advise on this, because since you have been in the field as IIHMR, so I think I definitely, I see, I did my PhD from IIHMR, so for me, like I got all the support that I needed from there. Uh, but I'm sure there are others, and this I would not say that I'm an expert on this in any way. So probably I would defer this to the experts. You could probably look it up online. I'm sure that there are a lot of rankings which are happening in this area.
Thank you, ma'am. There's another question from Dr. Ankita Sengupta. She says, are there any possibilities of unintended consequences or errors introduced by the CDSS, that is wrong recommendations, and
Mhm.
what can be solution? What can be the solution in that case?
Yes. So that's a very valid point you are raising, because even though with the AI progressing as much as it has today, there are a lot of chances of hallucinations. And hallucinations not just in terms of someone giving just some extra information, but actually giving wrong information, which is where the doctors are also having concerns that how much can we rely on it versus not. But that is the exactly the reason why the CDSS is being called as a support system, and not as the decision maker, because it is meant to only give you recommendations. It is not telling you what to do. But as a doctor, if you are going to adopt one of those recommendations, it's always advisable that the doctor also re-verifies it. We are still, I would say, we are still not there yet in terms of medical recommendations being very precise, even with Google doing their med LLM model. And we've recently seen a spate of different models which are coming out in the large language model space. But the accuracy is still, let's say, around like just 85 to 90%, which still means that there are 10 to 15% cases where the recommendations may not be correct. A lot of it also has to do with the data. So an AI model or a LLM model can only be as good as the data is. Presently, it's a lot of the data that comes in spite of so much information, there is like data which is not coherent with each other. There is incomplete information. There is missing data. So unfortunately, there could be situations where the AI doesn't give accurate recommendations, and I think it's almost going to be impossible for it to ever give 100% accuracy in everything. But that's where we want the decision making power to lie with the physician, because at the end of the day, it is the reputation of the physician which is at stake. So he needs to kind of also do a cross validation once he gets the recommendation and he does think that this has merit in it. He needs to verify some of that information himself as well before he performs that particular treatment.
Thank you, ma'am. There's another question from Dr. Vishal Sarkar. He asks, can AI systems be biased, potentially predicting a higher likelihood of diseases based on race or gender?
Yes, there have been instances of this actually. So just think of the AI itself. It is being trained on data from the past. Now, because it's being trained on data from the past, there could be instances wherein there was an outbreak of a disease in a particular locality which had a certain race which was more dominant. And this has typically happened, if you take the developed countries viewpoint, there are areas where the black community, for example, is more prominent. So, and they are also the ones who are probably socio-economically, they have been in the lower category. So what the model tended to do was it got very biased. It learned from that trend that, yeah, it's this population which constantly has this disease, and it started predicting that in future also, that this is going to be the risky population, this is going to have more incidence of diseases. And in fact, like, this is a very famous case study where it was found that the health insurance company started using a model like this. And when they did, since the model was predicting that this population is going to have these XYZ diseases, the health insurance premiums for this population went up drastically. Now, because this black population was already to begin with not socioeconomically very rich, right? So now suddenly you are being asked to pay higher premiums as well, which you can't afford. So this became like a national level hue and cry that this has happened, and then they went back and they found that this was actually a problem with the AI itself. uh, Again, a lot, it's a big responsibility of the people who are creating the AI also, to ensure that the AI is not biased. And by biased, it could be biased by gender, it could be biased by religion, by race, by region, because it's only going to pick up those past trends and predict that something similar is going to happen. So ensuring that adequate representation is there and making the AI unbiased is a very important thing, especially from an ethical standpoint. Thanks. That's a very important point you raised.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, there are many questions actually pending. There are
Well, I
nine
think
to be precise.
I think
So,
let's spend time on question answers. I think that through this it will be better to answer questions rather
y-
than me just having a dialogue by myself.
yes, ma'am. So, would you like to answer the questions right now, ma'am, or do you want to
Let's do it.
do some part of the
Yeah, I think we have time. So let's like spend the rest of the time. I think at the high level, we've spoken about the use cases. It's more important that we address people's questions. And again, like
Okay, ma'am.
I think at this moment, everybody is kind of a learner in AI, because AI itself is really expanding us at such a fast pace that what you learned just 2 months back is no longer relevant when it comes to a new technique or a new practice which is coming in AI. So definitely let's spend time with the questions. I think that will be more fruitful.
Right, ma'am. So the next question is by Debashish
Mm-hmm.
Metia. How is
Mm-hmm.
AI being implemented in clinical trial phases and how it works in clinical trials? He's asked.
Okay, so I did touch upon this a little bit earlier. Like, when for example, a drug manufacturer has to come out with a medication, for example, now they have to plan out. So, first is the research itself, which is around the molecular part, but then they have to plan out what's the test population they are going to use in these different phases, right? So, first of all, at the first phase itself, AI is being used to determine which is the study group that you want to try out this trial on. Then once you have the study group onboarded, how, first of all, then after this, then the question is, how do you reach out to the study group? So that comes to the part which I was talking about, the outreach. How do you do the right marketing? How do you get these people to sign up with you? So again, like, there are models which predict, where you will get your maximum response rate, how you should reach out to them. Now you have your study population on board, and now you're administering the drug. Again, you'll have a test and control population. So again, to record the outcomes that you're seeing at each phase, you'll be using AI also, and then looking at which particular populations responded better to the treatment, which did not, and then suggesting better populations for the next round of phase trials, because from phase 1 it will move to phase 2 and then to phase 3. So at each round this process will keep getting repeated. So those are the immediate use cases that come to mind when it comes to pharma related trials.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is from Hariom Singh. He asks, ma'am, in future, will AI be able to reduce the side effects or adverse effects of allopathic medicine? As we all know, allopathic medicine have serious side effects.
Yes. So the only way it can reduce the side effects is if it tells you not to use that particular drug. It depends on the drug itself, right? So uh, a l- it can, if it tells you that, okay, instead of the using this particular allopathic drug, use an alternate medicine form which does not have as many side effects, then sure it can. But again, the AI is being trained using data that we are generating. Are we generating enough data in research papers, first of all, which is creating those data points that, okay, let's say for diabetes patients, I have tried out these allopathic drugs and we have tried out these alternative treatments, and this is, the results, and these alternative treatments which have less side effects are beating this particular allopathic drug. Unfortunately, like, even though there is, within India we see a lot of homeopathy, ayurveda, all these alternative medicines which are supposedly have lesser side effects, but enough research is not being published about it. And without that research being published, nobody is confident enough that, can we actually prescribe it. And because of that, see, the AI itself will not cook up a story that, yeah, this is a drug which is showing lesser side effects, unless it is shown in research itself. Then it can pick up from those research papers and say, let's move away from this drug. Now let's say, even for that particular drug, as it is coming through the clinical trial phases, sure, at that point of time, if the AI realizes that, let's say, the side effect of a particular drug is that it can cause heart attack as well, at that point of time the AI can suggest and say that, this particular drug has this problem. But then again, you have to go back and AI can assist you in developing a different molecular formula for that. But it cannot be that the AI itself reduces the side effects. It has to be either from the drug manufacturer side, or enough research being published on alternative medicines to which AI can then point to and give recommendations to the clinicians. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, ma'am. Next question is from Dr. Srinidhi. She's asking, what are the guidelines for AI in healthcare from the government?
So the government is also coming up with quite stringent guidelines, rightly so, because of, number one, the data that is being used. So, of course, like, the DPAP Act is there. It's there to protect the patient health data. So, we have to ensure that the patient health data is protected properly. This health information is not going out there for everyone to use. And then also how AI will be used ethically and responsibly. because it's not just sufficient that we just say, okay, let's keep the patient data safe. But then again, like those questions about bias coming into the treatment, or the AI doing hallucinations, how much power are you going to give AI to make the decision making on your behalf? Is the AI fair and transparent? So transparency is also becoming up coming up in a big way, because now increasingly, like when you give a treatment, you should know why you give that particular treatment. You can't just say, okay, AI recommended it to me and I did this. So again, like all these things are now coming into are very important. From a patient autonomy point of view, you need to communicate to the patient that this is the treatment I'm going to give you. Let's say it's a robotic surgery versus a normal surgery, it is the patient's call on whether they want to go ahead with it all as well. So at every given point of time, you have to be transparent, you have to be fair, you have to be accountable. You have finally, the accountability of the treatment lines with that of the physician. It's not the data scientist's responsibility who built the model. So that's where the critical aspects would be, and that's where the regulators are also focusing on. So a lot of these medical apps which are now coming out, they will call themselves as diagnostic symptom trackers, or trying to give you recommendations. They have to adhere to those standards which the regulator is now putting out. Because let's say, as a person, and I don't even go to a doctor, I ask the AI or what, a chat GPT, that I'm having chest pain, what should I do? What if it gives me a wrong recommendation and I follow it, I take some medicine which causes my condition to worsen? Or I was allergic to something, it did not know that, it just gave me a recommendation. So increasingly there's a lot of regulation which is coming. But of course, we are in India, we know that implementation of these regulations is a whole another ball game. So how long it will take and what will happen after that still needs to be played out. But I think at a global level, this whole regulation thing is important. WHO has come out with ethical principles for the use of AI in healthcare. So if you've not gone through that, that's a very important. It's not a long read as well. It's a very important read to know which are the important ethical principles when it comes to AI and the use of healthcare. So yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is from Aisha, ma'am. She is asking that you have mentioned about COVID-19 during 2021, where in Singapore there was a tracing app where they mentioned the data will be used for the purpose of criminal investigation. So, isn't that invading the patient privacy?
So again, like how much of it was informed consent, right? Like did the people willingly consent to joining the app? If not, again, like a very important ethical principle is patient consent, right? I want to get my data recorded or not. And of course, like if they have informed the patient upfront that yes, you will be your data will be used for this purpose, and you're okay, and you have that voluntary aspect of still wanting to sign up, then it's your choice. So it's consent and then informed consent for it to be ethical. I know in India also we had the Arogya Setu app, for example, which was tracking like who's having COVID-19 or not and looking at contact tracing. But again, like how much information was given to us on how that data will be used? That's more important, and whether we know where all it will be used. So if in that case, if the patients were not informed in advance and this came to light much later on, yes, it was a violation of their privacy, and it was against the ethical principles.
Right, ma'am. Shaswat, he asks in robotic surgery, here I see a line mentioned less pain, less scarring. What exactly
Mhm.
does this mean?
So here, what we are trying to say here is that when you're doing the operation, because the reason they give is that with a robotic machine or something, the size of the slit that you make during the surgery itself can be reduced, because now you're being more pinpointed, and hence there is the time it takes to heal after the surgery also, it's like much faster, so there's lesser pain. And of course, like if the size of the actual cut is smaller, then there's lesser scarring. So this has been typically like one of the important advantages that people are now talking about. And now in fact with AI, now they're saying that you don't even need to make a cut, it's all non-invasive. So they're now having the tubes go in and they're doing the probes internally. So earlier some of those things which were more invasive are also now becoming non-invasive.
Thank you, ma'am. Rat, Ratchamari is asking, I'm a physiotherapist in orthopedic, master of physiotherapy in orthopedics. How can it be helpful for my profile?
Okay, so what I'm understanding is that in that case, like you're treating more of knee related problems or maybe like orthopedic related problems. So again, like from your perspective, if first of all, like what think of what are the initial stages of your work, like what is it that you find the most mundane work? Is it around documentation of patients as they're coming in? AI can help you in the documentation of that. If it was about predicting how if which are the patients who are responding better to your physiotherapy versus others, you want to do a comparison, you can have like different patient profiles built in with AI, and you can start recording the results, how many patients took how much time to heal using which type of physiotherapy that you're trying to give them. So that can even help you in segregating for your populations which type of treatment works better for which population. Then you can also see which for patients which have gone out of pattern, let's say a patient is needing 20 cycles of physiotherapy instead of the normal 10. You can look at what is happening with those outlier patients, what kind of why they are taking so long, what's the patient history like. Again, it can help you identify which cases might be needed to be treated differently. So again, like it can help you with better patient profile. Let's say after at the end of your visit or whatever, patients are giving you feedback on something. Now you have like let's say 100 records of patient feedback with you. AI can help you sift through them and identify what are the key problems that they were talking about. So, someone having a pain, let's say in their knee, versus someone having a pain in the back. What were the key points? What are the key differentiators they spoke about? Even in terms of your service, like they can be talking about certain sentiments that this was good, this was bad. It can help you figure that out. So, anything which has data in it or where you need data or which can help you in better decision making, AI and predictive modeling can help you there. Even if let's say you want to tomorrow do let's say you're an entrepreneur and you want to send out marketing mailers to people that come and get treatment at my facility, it can help you in identifying who's the right population segment to target. If you have data on your nearby locality people, what their age groups are, it can even help you in designing better campaigns on who to send and which channel to use. Should it be newspaper, should it be through a ad in the TV or whatever? So anything which concerns with decision making, AI can help you with that.
Thank you, ma'am. Nazneen asks, how can we factor for genetic differences in data sets used for training versus the patients, especially considering a lot of research in the field and the data comes from American or European populations rather than India? What are the possible solutions that can be implemented?
Yeah, so of course you've hit the nail on the head. The data is of course the number one issue, especially with genealogical data. Even if you look at the US and EU populations, the data is not that much. It's very sparse. So typically people will rely on data collection itself, which is happening at hospitals or in specialized facilities. Um, and you're rightly pointing out that there are cases where that particular research which has happened on people which are in Europe may not be applicable for people in India. So of course, having that database set up in India, collecting Indian patients, doing those studies on Indian patients is going to be very important. Having said that, there are still Indian populations which exist even in those countries. So anytime when people say that okay, this was conducted on a European region, it's important to segregate by race as well, that which are the races on which this particular test or this particular research study has been conducted on. And there you can, if you can bifurcate by race and you can bifurcate by genealogies, then you can use it. But again, like AI, uh, in sparse areas, what you can do is AI can help you with synthetic data creation now. So that's the good part. Or you can create, as I said, digital twins. Those kind of things are now coming up. So with AI changing its form and so fast, I do think that in the coming days we will have a counter to that. We will be able to create those synthetic data sets if the real ones are not available. But of course, at the base level, the most important thing would be that how we collect this data in the first place from some of these low represented economies, so to say, whether it's India or we're talking about other Asian populations. So that's going to be important. Yeah, Neha, next question.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. The next question is from Dr. Ankita Sengupta. She is
Mhm.
asking how are updates to AI models handled from a regulatory standpoint, especially when they involve changes to clinical recommendations?
Okay, so this means that you're already assuming that people are using a lot of AI in clinical recommendations. Unfortunately, I have worked with almost a lot of the top US healthcare brands. Um, Again, with the updates to AI, nobody is only relying on AI. First of all, a lot of the decision making is still manual. I would say even 80% of it still being manual. So with updates to AI, the only thing which is happening is that people are probably using the newer version of the technology. With LLMs, of course, there has been a drastic change in how people have been thinking of it. But even now, if we think of it like LLMs, like MedLM, which is being built, or some of these other healthcare LLMs like Gemini, which are more focused on the healthcare side, we haven't. People are still in experimentation stage. Nobody has started doing full scale application of these in hospital settings, so to say, that people are relying on them for clinical recommendations already. They are still, and in future also they are going to be a support system or a recommendation engine, but that too is going to take a while before clinicians themselves start accepting it. The biggest challenge in the adoption has been the doctors themselves stating that how can we rely on an AI, and who will take the fall if the AI is wrong. And of course it's their reputation on the line. So they are also concerned, and a silent fear which is also there is that, will AI replace me tomorrow? So if today I show that yes, whatever the AI is doing is exactly what I am doing today, then over a period of a year, 2 years, it'll become apparent that the doctors are also becoming redundant. So given that those will be the situations and those are the concerns, we have not seen that much large scale adoption presently in the industry, especially on the healthcare side. People are where there is very little margin of error, so people are still waiting and watching and still waiting for other people to take a first step before they adopt it to that extent.
Okay, ma'am, thank you. The next question is from Anushka Borate. What are the main benefits of robotic surgery for both surgeons and patients?
So I already listed it out. I did not read out every single one of them, but of course, it's more about just the time that it takes. A robotic surgery means lesser fatigue for the surgeon. He can exactly, precisely guide the robot to where what needs to be done. It facilitates a better visualization of the surgical site. Again, I am not a medical doctor, so some of this, if you feel that you want to counter it, I'm happy for that. But definitely, I've spoken to doctors who've mentioned the tremor that happens in the surgeon's hand, that's completely eliminated. And even there's been data which showed that surgery from the robotics was reporting shorter hospital stays. People were recovering faster, and even after the surgery was over, they were able to get healed much faster and go about their usual routine. So definitely from a patient point of view, if I'm having lesser pain, I'm able to get back to my routine faster. And from a doctor point of view, if I have lesser fatigue, I'm able to guide the machine where it needs to be without having to be there, right there, or completely doing the operation myself. It's actually better for me also.
Thank you, ma'am. There are many questions on how does AI help in dentistry and how does AI help in Ayurveda and pharmacy. We already got one question. What is the scope of healthcare informatics in the US? So these short questions are there, ma'am.
So again, without addressing one of them specifically, what I'll say is, think of any decision making which needs to happen. Okay, any point of decision making where data exists, AI can help you there. If there is a task you are doing which is mundane, which you are doing repetitively, which you feel maybe it's like, can I just, instead of having to write this myself, can I just speak it out and someone writes this for me? AI can help you there. So in any area, like you would know these areas probably even better than me, because I am not a practicing Ayurveda doctor. But think of those specific areas where there are mundane activities, where there's decision making, where knowing in advance who is more at risk is going to be important. Where you need to lower costs, so you need to know which particular heads you are spending the most in and how you can optimize those costs, where you need recommendations on understanding which particular product to go with. You have a choice to make amongst different products or amongst different drugs. All those areas is where AI can help you. So think of those applications in your specific domains, and if you have the data for it, AI can support you in that.
Meeting is
And if
over.
you don't have adequate data for it, AI can help you in creating more data for it and then help you in application.
Thank you, ma'am. Then there's a question: how can interdisciplinary approach be used to address use of AI in healthcare? Should doctors learn data science and data scientists learn healthcare? How do we make these solutions practical at all levels of healthcare? Many AI projects don't see the light of the day. Is sustainability an issue?
Yeah, I think this is a very important aspect that you've touched upon. Like, I think to a certain extent, yes, it is important for different practitioners to learn what the other one is also doing, so that we don't just close our eyes. So, like, I come from a AI/ML domain. I've worked with health on the healthcare side. I've also worked on the fintech side. I would say it's very important for me to understand the domain even as I'm designing my models. Why? Let's say when I'm looking at certain diseases, there could be seasonality in diseases like, malaria or dengue. If my model is not accounting for those seasonalities, there's a chance it's wrong. There could be biases in the population that was mentioned. There could be certain races which are having a certain disease incident. If I'm not accounting for that bias in my model, it could go wrong. So I need to understand the medical landscape before I start even developing my model. I need to understand how the ICD codes work. I need to know how I'll plug in that information. I need to know where the missing data could be originating from. So it's very important. I would not say you need to become a doctor to then become a data scientist, but you need to have that kind of collaboration with a doctor, that you know what the important nuances are to everything. So, for example, I worked in the PMJ scheme, which is Ayushman Bharat scheme, and we used to see on we were working on like fraud control at that time, and we were trying to see which are the hospitals where we are suddenly seeing big spikes happening, and we are seeing, okay, suddenly a lot of treatment is happening, and most likely we would say that there's some kind of activity which is not normal, could be fraud, and we would then go for audits. Now there was this hospital which was located in Jharkhand, and there was like a lot of neonatal treatments which were being performed, even though there were other neonatal hospitals close by. But this particular hospital was having like the treatments in thousands.
Nice.
Uh, okay, so I think there's some noise coming in. So in
Somebody,
that, yeah.
yeah, their mic was not muted. Kindly please mute your mics, guys. Yes, ma'am. Please continue.
So there was this hospital in Jharkhand, and we saw that a lot of treatments were coming from there, and we suspected that there could be something, some fraud activity which could be happening there. So we actually went there and we actually spoke to some of the people, and what we found is that this was a hospital where there was a super specialist in neonatology pediatric who was performing out of that hospital. So even though there were other hospitals in the vicinity, but nobody wanted to go there, everybody wanted to come to this hospital for treatment. Now, again, how would we know this sitting in Delhi in our central offices, that there's this one hospital in Jharkhand which is having this kind of a super specialist visiting? So this information flow becomes very important, that and even for the doctor, like if I have to trust an AI, I don't know what it does, everything is a black box for me. All these deep learning techniques, which is why people don't prefer them in healthcare, is that it becomes a black box. You put in something, you get an output, you don't know how that output came out. So I need to know what's happening in that black box. I need to know, can I trust it? Do I know how that particular decision or that recommendation is being made by the machine itself? So I need to also learn a little bit about data science. I need to know how the basics work, even though I don't need to be a data scientist myself coding away. But I need to know the high level, that okay, this is what a model is, this is typically how it will be reaching a decision, to that extent. So yes, it is very fairly intra as well as interdisciplinary that we need to follow. And that is how the model's performance also doubles and triples when there is collaboration between these different stakeholders.
Thank you,
So
ma'am.
I think, Neha, I think we are on time though, but like, is there how many more questions do we have?
Ma'am, 4, 5 more to go.
So can we do something? So my ID, I'm available on LinkedIn. Why don't you guys feel free to message me there with your questions, because I have another meeting I need to rush to. Uh, so maybe we can do this post that, if that's okay.
Yes, ma'am. We can. Either you can put your LinkedIn this thing, or people
Yeah.
can search you in LinkedIn and then they can text you there.
I think that will be helpful, yeah. Because
Yeah.
I think, given only a 1 hour slot and I have another meeting
Yes,
now.
ma'am. Yes,
So
ma'am.
yeah, apologies
Uh,
for that.
So, apologies, guys. Rest for the rest of the questions. You please get in touch with ma'am. And before we close that session, thank you so much, ma'am. The session was actually so insightful and knowledge gaining. And also, ma'am, before we leave and proceed for the feedback and the certificate link, I'd request all of you guys to please switch on your front cameras and show your beautiful faces so that we can take a picture of the session that we have attended it. Yeah, we're good to go. Are all there? I can see a few faces. Okay, thank you. And there will be a feedback link posted in the chat box. So you all need to fill the feedback link, post which you will be given the certificate. And please get in touch with ma'am for the rest of your queries. Thank you so much, ma'am, for spending your time with us.
No, thank you so much for having me. Thanks, special thanks to the IHMR for organizing this, and it's been a pleasure. And thank you for being such a wonderful audience, and making this